Hi, I'm Miss Teresa. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. Today we are going to have a lot of fun. We have a special day planned out for us. We are going to learn all about a letter today. Today we are going to learn about the letter H. We have a capital H with two lines going down and one line across. And then we have a lowercase h, one line coming down and a bump. Let's see what begins with the letter H. Let's see, help me out. What are these? Right, hands. Hands begin with the letter H. Hands. What else begins with the letter H? Let's see. What is this? Good job. Heart. Heart begins with the letter H. Can you think of any other words that begin with the letter H? Good job. Let's see what else we have. I think you'll know this one. It's a horse. Horse. Horse begins with the letter H. We have two more pictures. Let's see. These are going to give us a little bit of a hint, a clue as to what our stories are about today. We have a hat. Hat. What kind of a hat is this? It's purple and it has yellow stars. It's tall and pointy. Could it be a witch's hat? Maybe. Could it be a wizard's hat? That's a good choice too. Should we see our last picture? Let's think. We have a witch's hat or a wizard's hat, and we have a, what's this? A haunted house. Haunted house. Haunted house. Have you guessed what we're going to read about today? Yeah, today we're going to read about Halloween. Halloween. So let's get right into our first story. And it's called At the Old Haunted House. Woo! I got a shiver. Let's see what our story is about. At the Old Haunted House by Helen Ketteman. At the old haunted house, in a room with no sun, lived a warty green witch and her wee little one. And they both practiced spells in the room with no sun. Spell, cried the witch. Poof, cried the one. Ooh, look at that witch. And I think we have a junior witch. Let's see what else is in this old haunted house. At the old haunted house, where cold draft blue, lived a big mom monster and her wee ones too. And they whirred and they stirred while the cold draft blew. Stir, called the ma. We stir, cried the two. I think they're making something with pumpkins. Looks like Mom is maybe carving a jack-o'-lantern, or maybe she's going to make some pumpkin pie. By the old haunted house in the dead hollow tree lived a scrawny black cat and her wee kittens 3. And they scratched and they growled in the dead hollow tree. Scratch, cried the mother. Meow, cried the 3. And who is walking right by that tree? Do we have trick-or-treaters? Very good. At the old haunted house with the squeaky old floor lived a green paw goblin and his wee goblins 4. And they spread lots of dust on the squeaky old floor. "Dust!" cried the paw. "We dust!" said the 4. How silly is that? Instead of cleaning up the dust, they're putting dust everywhere. At the old haunted house where scary things jive lived a ma werewolf and her wee wolfies 5. And they yowled and they howled where scary things jive. "Howl!" cried the ma. "Ow!" wailed the 5. What are these silly werewolves doing? Yeah, they're dancing. How silly. In the old haunted house, in a vault made of bricks, lived a papa vampire and his little vamp 6. And they snarled and they shrieked in the vault made of bricks. "Show fangs!" Papa cried. "Hiss!" went the 6. Those vampires don't look scary to me. They look like they are a silly, silly, silly bunch of vampires. Ooh, what are these? At the old haunted house, teaching a lesson, was a hairy mom bat and her bitty bats 7. And they dipped and they dove in their dip diving lesson. "Dip dive!" cried the mom. "Flip flap!" went the 7. There are those bats flying all over the place. And if we look closely, who is coming up that driveway? It's the trick-or-treaters. By the old haunted house near the graveyard gate lived a spooky dad ghost and his wee ghosties 8. And they booed and they floated through the graveyard gate. "Haunt!" cried the dad. "Boo!" cried the 8. Look at those ghosts. Those scary ghosts. No, I think they're silly ghosts too. At the old haunted house, half covered with vines, lived a mummy mommy and her wee mummies 9. And they stirred and they mixed in the house with the vines. "Mix!" called the mommy. "We mix!" called the 9. So there they all are, mixing, and I think I see their wraps coming undone too. Who's peeking in the window? The trick-or-treaters. At the old haunted house, in the dusty old den, lived a fat ma spider and her wee spiders 10. And they spun sticky webs in the dusty old den. "Spin!" cried the mom. "Weave ho!" said the 10. Look at those very goofy and zany spiders. At the old haunted house, the front door creaked. "Trick or treat!" yelled the children. The ghosts cried, "Eek!" Uh-oh, I think our trick-or-treaters might have scared the ghosts. "Come in!" called Ma Mummy. The monsters made stew. The mummies made cake. The witches zapped brew. What was going on inside this house? Yeah, they were setting up for a Halloween party. The creatures all grinned as they struck up the band, and the spiders all swung on their sticky web strands. The ghosties floated as the music played. Black cats scratched and werewolves bayed. I think everyone is having a super good time. And the vampire band played music all night, and they all had fun at the Halloween fright. The end. What a great story. I was a little worried that it might be scary, but all of our friends were just getting ready for a big Halloween bash. Why don't we read one more story? And this story is about a haunted house too, but I'm going to need some help because we are going to have to remember things when we read this story together. And this story is called Inside a House That is Haunted. Will you help me read? Fantastic. Let's read together. Inside a House That is Haunted by Alyssa Capucilli. Here is a house that is haunted. Here's the hand that knocked on the door. Outside a house that is haunted. Who's knocking? I think it's Frankenstein too. Help me out. Here we go. Here is the hand that knocked on the door and startled the spider that dropped to the floor inside a house that is haunted. Here is the hand that knocked on the door and startled the spider that dropped to the floor, that frightened the ghost who awoke and cried, "Boo!" inside a house that is haunted. Great job, let's keep going. Here is the hand that knocked on the door and startled the spider that dropped to the floor, that frightened the ghost who awoke and cried, "Boo!" surprising the cat that jumped and screeched, "Meow!" inside a house that is haunted. Here is the hand that knocked on the door and startled the spider that dropped to the floor, that frightened the ghost who awoke and cried, "Boo!" surprising the cat that jumped and screeched, "Meow!" that shook up the bats that swooped through the air inside a house that is haunted. Here is the hand that knocked on the door and startled the spider that dropped to the floor, that frightened the ghost who awoke and cried, "Boo!" surprising the cat that jumped and screeched, "Meow!" that shook up the bats that swooped through the air and jolted the owl that called, Who's there?" inside a house that is haunted. Here is the hand that knocked on the door and startled the spider that dropped to the floor, that frightened the ghost who awoke and cried, "Boo!" surprising the cat that jumped and screeched, "Meow!" that shook up the bats that swooped through the air and jolted the owl that called, Who's there?" that spooked the mummy who ran with a shriek inside a house that is haunted. Here is the hand that knocked on the door and startled the spider that dropped to the floor, that frightened the ghost who awoke and cried, "Boo!" surprising the cat that jumped and screeched, "Meow!" that shook up the bats that swooped through the air and jolted the owl that called, Who's there?" that spooked the mummy who ran with a shriek, rattling the skeleton who moved with a creak inside a house that is haunted. Here is the hand that knocked on the door and startled the spider that dropped to the floor, that frightened the ghost who awoke and cried boo, surprising the cat that jumped and screeched mew, that shook up the bats that swooped through the air and jolted the owl that called, who's there? That spooked the mummy who ran with a shriek, rattling the skeleton who moved with a creak, that woke the monster who stomped on huge feet, threw open the door and heard trick or treat. Inside a house that is haunted. Uh-oh, what just happened? Yeah, the little boy scared the monster and the skeleton and the mummy and the ghost and the cat and the owl and the bats. And they all ran away. The end. Great job reading with me. Did you use all of those pictures to help us remember who was in the story? Me too. Thanks so much for coming and sharing in some stories. Why don't we make a little something now? I'll meet you over at the DIY corner. Hi, thanks for joining me over in the DIY table. Today, we are going to make slime because it's kind of spooky like our stories. So what we'll need is some borax, half a cup of water, a half a cup measuring cup, a teaspoon measuring spoon, some glue, some plastic silverware, a couple of spoons, and a fork. Some food coloring. I'm using red and yellow because red and yellow combined make orange. Perfect for Halloween. We have another cup, a big cup with 1 cup of water and a Ziploc baggie. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to take our half a cup of water and add half a cup of glue to it. Let's do that. Pour that right in. Perfect. Then we are going to mix them together. That comes right in, and you can use a spoon to help get some of that glue out. If you don't have a half cup measuring cup, or maybe mom doesn't want you to use the one she uses to bake, half a cup is basically 1 bottle of glue. So we could have dumped this right in. And once that glue is in there, we're going to give it a good stir. And then we can add our food coloring. So we'll take a little bit of red, put a few drops in there. Whoops! Sometimes that happens. So let's see, let's add a little bit of yellow. Let's see. Teresa's going to add a little bit more yellow. Right now we've got almost like a pink. So let's see if we can make this a little more orangey. Stir that up. Ooh, I like that. I think we're going to have a nice bright orange. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put this to the side, and we're going to take this other cup. So this is 1 cup of water. We'll take our teaspoon, and we are going to add 1 teaspoon of borax to our 1 cup of water. So let's see. Put that in there and take out a teaspoon. And if it's a little more, that's fine. Do that. And we're going to take our other spoon and give that a good stir too. And we want to be careful. We don't want to splash all over, but we want to try and dissolve all of those borax crystals. We'll give it a little stir. Get some of those little clumps that just don't want to dissolve. All right, that looks good to me. What we're going to do is we are going to take our glue mixture, put that in there, and we're going to pour it right in to our water and borax. I'm just going to give it a little stir while I pour. There we go. Ooh, and it's already starting to form that slime. Sometimes I like to switch my spoon for my fork. I know that probably sounds a little silly. We do this and we can pull out the beginnings of our slime. Ooh, this is going to be great slime. So we stir it up. It may take a minute or so of stirring to get that slime nice and slimy, slimy. So after stirring for a while, what will happen is you will get, oh, it stuck to my fork, a big glob of slime. Now, the more you play with your slime, the more you can do with it. It'll get a little bit harder, and you can do all sorts of craziness. Here we go, we're just working that slime. This is a pretty messy craft, but it's lots of fun. So I'm going to keep working my slime. Have lots of fun making your own. And thanks for joining me today.